Yeah, sure. Okay, good morning. Kia ora koutou, everyone. My name is Emily Lambie. I am a research officer at the Joint Centre for Disaster Research. And here with me today, I have my colleagues, Marion.
Hi, I'm Marion Tan, and I'm also a research officer here at the Joint Centre for Disaster Research. And Nilani.
Hi, I'm Nilani. I'm a PhD student here at the JCDR. Nice to see you all together today.
So welcome to our TechWeek Cast and Converse series. This session is our second, and for those of you who joined us on Tuesday, we're hoping that today will have just as much energy that our discussions had on Tuesday. So we're really hoping that you'll ask as many questions of our speakers to make this as much of a learning about other projects as it will be a connecting opportunity. So the Joint Centre for Disaster Research is hosting this event today because of our growing interest in the macro trends and emerging technologies that are shaping our cities and how we can use that technology to build societal resilience. Today we're focusing on earthquake early warning, just to give an example of a direct application of technology that's putting people first. And our speakers who we'll introduce as we'll go are all working in just different aspects of early warning and societal resilience. So I'm going to come back to how today will run and what you can expect out of our discussion. But just before we kick off, we have a bit of a presentation about smart resilient cities, just to help set the scene a little bit about what we have been working towards and how it's bringing together a lot of different projects that fit within smart resilient cities. So this is a jointly funded research program that, like I said, is looking to the global movement accelerating the opportunity for how emerging technology and data can be leveraged to improve resilience. And there's the logo graveyard down the bottom of who is supporting this work. And sort of the thinking behind all of this and why it's come about and why it's so important at the moment is because of how emerging technologies and data processing tools are changing the cities we live in and how we live in them. So we're no longer living in a world where we just seek information, but we are information, and how we move, how we consume, how we interact is being captured for developing the systems and services we use. So what does this mean for disaster risk reduction? What does this mean for how we can make our communities more resilient and adapt in the face of disruption and disaster? And really, what is the technology that is going to make the difference for them? How do we make their lived experience better? So quite a range of questions that fall under the Smart Resilient Cities umbrella.
So the Smart Resilient Cities pretty much is covered into three main themes, that is looking at data, sensors, and people. And if you came on Tuesday, we had a really interesting discussion about sensors and how we manage data, and also about robotics. And so we're looking at, there's so much emerging technology that can help our cities become smarter and eventually our society more resilient. But we're looking at these three aspects, data, sensors, and people, and exploring the use of sustainable and low-cost state-of-the-art sensors so that we can maintain a sensibility of the city before and during after a major disruption. But it's not just about sensing, it's also about how do we manage this data, how do we connect them, and how do we make sure that this data is used during and before and after a major disruption. And at the end of the day, even if we have the data and the sensors, we still have to think about the people, because at the end of the day, it's about the end user having accepted and trusted the technology for the human infrastructure impacts. So in this Smart Resilient Cities work stream, we also look at ethical standards and practice priorities, and looking at community-wide opportunities. So on Tuesday, we had a really more broad discussion about smart cities in general, but today our focus, as Emily has said, would be on earthquake early warning. And for some people here in this room, you might not know what earthquake early warning is, but it's basically a warning that you might get a few seconds to a minute before shaking occurs. And hopefully our speakers will get into a little bit more detail on that or explain a little bit. But in essence, we can see here, for us to get a warning, we need sensors, we need to know how to manage the data, and also the people that will be accepting and managing this warning. So we're going to look at the, I guess, the interactions between these three aspects. So how will today work? So we have a good range of speakers, and hopefully we get a lot of discussion from their presentations as well. So we were divided this session into red time and green time. And basically red time would be our speakers having the floor to share some ideas, some projects, or some other case uses of earthquake early warning. And then if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat box. Try not to disrupt their 5 minutes, and then we can facilitate the discussion after. So the green time would be opening the floor for discussion for everyone in this room. So you can ask questions of the speakers, but you can also ask questions from each other. So hopefully we'll have a good range of discussion. So we have basically 3 lumps of sessions. So red time, green time, red time, green time, and so on. So that's how today will work. So if people have any questions or how today would work?
Yeah, I think so. It's the usual Zoom etiquette. So if you're not speaking, please be mindful about being on Zoom. If you would like to show us your faces, that would be much appreciated. So we're not just staring at black boxes. But yeah, as Marion said, type any of your questions in the chat, and we'll be kind of monitoring through screens to make sure that we can get as many questions answered today as possible. But we do really want to make sure that the conversations keep going outside of this Zoom. So yeah, definitely keep in touch with each other once we've had the discussions today. So yes, it'll be a lightning style round. So we'll get started. We're a minute ahead of schedule, so that's fantastic. Off to a good start. We've got Julia Becker presenting first up. She's going to be talking about some of the work and research she's been involved with and led around the perceived potential for earthquake early warning in New Zealand. So Julia, it's over to you. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Can you see my screen? Is that good for you?
Yeah, yep, that's wonderful.
Cool. Let's see if I can put it on the slideshow. Awesome. Sorry, I'm just trying to work out how to get this to work. Okay, cool. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about a study that we did. So in the true style of what Emily and Marion were talking about, we decided to start with asking the people first about earthquake early warning and about some of their perspectives on that. So there's been a lot of technology development overseas in terms of earthquake early warning and in terms of you know, how the technology might work. But for Aotearoa New Zealand, I think it was really important for us to kind of go out and ask people first about kind of what they thought about earthquake early warning, how they might use it, and then some of the details about the system. So that's essentially what we did. And it's just got my name up there on the slide, but it was a really huge team across a whole lot of institutions and a whole lot of funding bodies as well, including the Earthquake Commission who kicked this research off. So yeah, so as Marion showed this slide before, what's an earthquake early warning? Essentially, as a user, as a person, as a member of the public, an earthquake early warning is the warning that you might get a few seconds or up to a minute maybe before feeling the shaking from the earthquake. And you can use sensors to detect that shaking further away. So you might detect that shaking closer to source and then send out an advanced warning further afield to locations that haven't experienced the shaking yet. And so you could get that warning before the shaking reaches you. or you can use different systems, for example, detection of the P wave before the actual S wave, where the shaking actually occurs, arrives, to give you a little bit of warning before that shaking occurs. So technology can help us do that, but the question really is, how did New Zealanders think that earthquake early warning might be of use to them? So essentially we did some work where we went out and asked people from different sectors, so people from emergency management, hospitals, people working in education, so lots of different places that might be able to use earthquake early warning. We asked them how they thought they might be able to use it and whether they thought it would be useful. And we also asked the public as well about what their perspectives were on earthquake early warning and whether it would be of use to them. And one of the diagrams you can see up there is one that Caroline, who's here with us today as well, helped us develop. And this was essentially using the GeoNet sensor network as it currently is, with its current sensors, to kind of develop some scenarios on whether you'd be able to get a warning from a specific earthquake. So the red star in the middle of that diagram that you can see is the Kaikoura earthquake, and then the circles around it show the different amounts of seconds of warning that you might get using the current GeoNet sensor network. So we use some of those scenarios as discussion points with people, just to kind of help them understand what kind of warning they might get from an earthquake like that, and from other modelled scenarios as well. So in general, we found that New Zealanders supported earthquake early warning, and they were really interested in seeing it progress. And some of the primary benefits are listed up there, including life safety and health and safety. That was sort of the #1 benefit. So if you could kind of drop, cover and hold, or turn off dangerous equipment before the shaking arrived, that was seen as a key benefit. One of the really interesting benefits we found was people were interested in this kind of idea of psychologically preparing or mentally preparing before shaking occurs. So being able to kind of brace yourself and know that in a few seconds or up to a minute you might get some shaking that you kind of had to be prepared for mentally. So that was a really important benefit to people. People felt that earthquake early warning would be useful as they kind of gave them a few seconds to think about activating their emergency plans and kind of assessing what the situation was going to be like and what they needed to do. And then there were also some quite organisational insight specific actions that people identified that could help reduce impacts. So maybe turning off essential equipment, using automatic triggering to kind of turn off computers, for example, so that they wouldn't get damaged when the shaking began. So people were able to identify some specific aspects that were useful. So some of the other key findings as well that people found, that people discussed, I guess, in the focus groups particularly, was that there was a desire for an integrated system of earthquake early warning. So that might be networks of sensors, could be integration across different messages, like the types of messages you were giving people. It could be integration with other things like engineering or preparedness. And people thought it was really important to think about the cross-peril implications. So if you have an earthquake and you're getting an earthquake early warning and you're near the coast, is there also going to be a tsunami warning? And how do you deal with that? How do you build that into your system and make sure that those types of things are integrated? We do have some experience of in-house sensors in New Zealand, so some of these smaller units that you can put in buildings and detect the P wave before the shaking wave arrives. So people discussed some of their experiences of those, mostly from a post-earthquake shaking assessment perspective, but the potential for using them for earthquake early warning. And when we talked to the public, they said that they would like warnings for moderate to strong shaking, with preferences for them coming via mobile phones, which aligns quite well with a lot of what is done overseas in terms of earthquake early warning. And so then finally, we just have a few challenges that people highlighted. So obviously, if you're working in a sector, people preferred using earthquake early warning for things that were easy to turn on and off. For example, you didn't necessarily want to turn off your whole water network or your whole gas network on receipt of a warning, in case perhaps the shaking wasn't big enough, because it leads to a lot of complicating factors about turning it on again at the other end. So easy to turn off, easy to turn on was preferred. There are challenges with motivating people with an effective response. If you're a member of the public and you get a warning, perhaps you want to drop, cover and hold, but in other countries like Japan, we see that sometimes those responses aren't that great. And so how do you get people to motivate them into taking appropriate responses that'll keep them safe? There are challenges about setting thresholds. So where do you set the threshold for triggering these warnings? And of course, developing the messages. What kind of messages do you want? How are these going to go out? You know, mobile phones a preference, but you obviously want other channels as well. Issues around public education and training. And then obviously cost, like how do you pay for these things? Do you want to pay for a really big network? Do you want to pay for a smaller network? How does this kind of all work? So we found that obviously there was a need for wider conversations about these topics as we kind of go forward in developing earthquake early warning and partnerships to advance this in Aotearoa New Zealand. So thank you. That's all I have to talk about this morning.
Thank you so much, Julia. That was really fantastic. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of questions for you during our discussion time. So Caroline, you are up next.
Sure.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you. So I'm just sharing the screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. And I just need to move things around to the full screen. Here we are, and I'm just going to move you guys around so I can see the screen here. Cool. All right, so I'm just putting my timer on because 5 minutes is tight. Let's see if I can do it. So my name is Caroline Holden, and I'm a seismologist at GNS Science. I've actually been sorry, my microphone's funny. I've actually been an earthquake duty officer for a decade. And I'm also the project leader for the Earthquake Early Warning Research Project as part of the National Science Challenges. So as a seismologist, I always assumed that seismology was a central part of an earthquake early warning system. I was wrong. There are actually 3 components of an early warning system, and seismology is not the central part. So here is the map to illustrate my point. This is a map of the National Seismic Network of New Zealand, so the GeoNet seismic monitoring network, and it's showing all the seismic stations that are monitoring continuously earthquakes in New Zealand. There's at least thousands of those seismic monitoring stations. So one component of an earthquake early warning system is the networks. So one network is about the data detection. So here we're talking about earthquakes. And there's also another really important network, which is the communication network. So the network that will actually deliver the alert to the end users. So that's one component. Now here's our earthquake for this presentation. So now here comes the seismology component of the earthquake early warning. So seismology is obviously essential. We need to be able to characterize the earthquake models behind this, the signal that's been detected, but also we need to be able to anticipate the level of ground shaking following that particular earthquake. So seismology is an important component of earthquake early warning. But the last component and the most important part that will define the success of an early warning system is the end user part. So the users are actually not only the recipient of the early warning alerts, they define the success of an early warning system. They will define the threshold that they wish to receive the alert, but they also define the tolerance level that they're happy to be subjected to in an earthquake early warning system. And so we define the level of false alerts that are occurring with certain systems. So now we're going back to our our earthquake duty officer. What's the role of an earthquake duty officer at the moment? So we're talking about a strong earthquake occurring here, and the duty officer is actually, the role of the duty officer is actually within the first hour following that earthquake. And what that person does, it provides direct information to emergency responders in terms of the effect of the earthquake and the impact of that earthquake. So it's a direct line towards the emergency responders. At the moment, this is the NEMA, National Emergency Management Agency. And then this particular end users, the emergency responders, will communicate then directly to either the public or industry or various communities. Oh yes, I forgot to talk about the users in the previous slide. The user group is actually quite broad. It can be the public, it can be emergency responders, and can be industry and various communities, building owners, engineering communities, and so on. So here we have a direct line from the duty officer to the emergency responders that then communicate to those two different end users. These occur within the first hour. That's the key role of the duty officer. And we're talking now about strong earthquakes or even larger earthquakes. So how does the earthquake early warning fit within this, this framework here? Well, actually, it's very complementary and very supportive of the duty officer's response. Unlike the duty officer role, which occurs within the first hour, the earthquake early warning actually occurs within the first 10 seconds to a minute following the earthquake. So the time frame is a lot shorter. The other difference is actually the earthquake early warning system communicates directly to those three different range of end users, not just to one, but can communicate to any of those, and also simultaneously as well. Now, if the earthquake early warning system informs the emergency responders, obviously this entity here will also use the valuable information to then communicate again towards the other two end users. The last difference, the third difference with the earthquake duty officer role is that the earthquake early warning can be set up for any threshold, not just for very strong shaking, unlike the response of a duty officer. So the level of shaking is actually tailored to the need of the different end users. Okay, I've got 5 minutes now, so I'm just going to conclude this talk by just saying on a personal level. So back to our duty officer role. How would an earthquake early warning make a difference? Well, first, on a personal level, it would provide, just like Julia mentioned before, psychological awareness, so psychological preparation for the strong shaking. Also will allow the duty officer to take safety action, because that person will be the key responders for the first hour following the earthquake. So whatever system we have in place, the system in red is always going to be our main response system. And finally, on a professional level, earthquake early warning will actually provide a duty officer with a regional awareness of the impact of the earthquake, so rapid regional awareness. I have my notes here. Potentially, we can also inform the duty officer for other impacts, so rapid information of secondary impacts, such as tsunami. And finally, the duty officer will also be able to focus on the job, knowing that emergency plans have possibly been activated following a large earthquake. And I'm going to finish on this one. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Caroline. That was really a great presentation, and really enjoyed that. And trying to see the perspective of the duty seismologist in terms of earthquake early warning. So thank you.
Thank you.
So next we have, so we're just rushing through, but thank you for your presentation. So next we have Garrick from the University of Waikato, and he will be presenting a feasibility study for the deployment of an earthquake early warning system in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So Garrick, if you could share a screen, and if you could get Caroline to stop sharing as well.
I just need Caroline to unshare her screen.
Okay, how do I do that?
There should be a button on top that says stop share.
Yes, right on top.
Yeah.
There you go. Thank you.
Alright. Can you see my
Yeah, perfect.
presentation?
Yes, we can see it.
Sweet as. Okay, so just to introduce myself, I'm Garrick du Toit. I'm in my honours year at the University of Waikato studying engineering, and along with the help of Alessandro this year, me and him are studying a feasibility for deployment of an early earthquake warning system in Aotearoa. So just to move in. So as been touched on in the past few presentations, but basically an earthquake early warning system essentially is just trying to provide warning to the end user of an earthquake coming in a timely manner so that preparation can be made. But basically a system can be, there's two main types of systems. So a front alarm, which is would be like an on-site, a front alarm, which would be something like a spread out network and trying to be close to the epicenter so that they can warn as soon as an earthquake occurs to the end user. And the other system is an on-site system, which would be like in a house or around in a city where you're trying to warn. And then there's two main types of triggers. So an earthquake produces a P wave as well as an S wave. So the P wave is a much faster wave, almost traveling double the speed of an S wave. P wave is usually undetectable to humans, but sensors can easily pick that up. So if you can sense that P wave, you can send out a warning in a timely manner so that the end user can get preparated before the damage in S wave, which is usually causes all the damage. Yeah, so as you see on the left, there's a picture in that Caroline showed as well, so I've got that as well. Basically, this is the sensor network in New Zealand. We currently don't have an early earthquake warning system in New Zealand, and that's just due to some systems, some of them are operating on different systems, they produce different outputs, so it's a bit hard to collate them and send out a warning before earthquake occurs. So it's usually a lot of the earthquake data is produced after the fact, which in an earthquake early warning system is not that useful. So it'd be trying to get all the systems on the same network, on the same data output, so that we can produce a good readings. Oh, sorry. And so there's currently 6 countries that have systems that are working. So the US, Japan, and Mexico, Turkey, Taiwan, and China. But US, Japan are kind of leading the way due to them having a lot of earthquakes around the world. So US has an annual loss of 4.1 billion. So it's kind of pretty important for them to have systems that work in, as well as Japan have the high-speed rail network, and the derailment at like 200 kilometers an hour is pretty bad. So just to talk about my research, Alessandra and my research. So as you can see that picture, we're going to be setting up 5 sensors at the University of Waikato. We're going to be testing the type of network, so between 5G, 4G, 3G, as there's not equality across New Zealand on the same network. 2 degrees setting up a 5G at the university, so hopefully we'll see the difference between the latencies. We're also going to be testing different techniques, so whether we use P wave as an identification or S wave. We need to test the threshold, so as was kind of stated in the last talk, there'll be a difference between commercial versus residential. So commercial might be more open to more alerts at a lower threshold, whereas residential might be not happy with having 10 alerts in a day. We're also going to check the density of a network. So this here will be quite densely packed compared to what we might be thinking in the real world, with about one station per 290 square meters. Around about, that's what the US is using at the moment. And then there's also integration, so you could have tsunami warnings, landslide warnings, and then you can also use it to identify where the earthquakes hit the worst and send out search and rescue to those responders straight away. We can also simulate using existing data to check our network, how it's working. And then I'm running a little bit over time, but I'll quickly go through this. So this on the left here, this is basically what we would be getting out of the systems. That's my sensor at my flat. So I'm the only one in Hamilton at the moment, and it's a bit noisy there. So that's like us sleeping at night, and then that's when my flatmates all wake up in the morning. So that's also a difficulty with these systems is filtering out the noise. So half the time I think they like tap dancing in the lounge or something. It's pretty hard to work with that, but that's a challenge that we're going to get overcome. And then here's basically the system that I've got in my lounge. So there's 3 geophones, one in the X direction, Y direction, and Z direction, and they're all picking up movement. And then we have the ability to get real-time data of here. So that's what we're experimenting with them at the moment, using getting the data from there onto my computer or whatever, and then manipulating that and to work with that for alerts. And that's me. Thanks for listening to that, and hope that was informational.
Cool. Thank you, Garrick. That was interesting, and it's quite nice to see also the sensitivity of the instrument, I guess, on the level of noise, and with you and your flatmates moving around. So thanks for that example. But thanks for our three presenters. That was really good, and I think we covered a lot of topics, and I'm sure people have questions. So I'll open up the floor for questions from the audience if you have any.
If you do have a question, just introduce yourself as well, so we can. Oh yes, Marianne.
My name's Marianne Clive. I'm at GNS Science. Thanks everyone. That was really interesting. It's sort of an area I'm learning more about. I have a question for Caroline. You mentioned the possibility of kind of rapid impact analyses coming from the earthquake early warning system. I wondered if you could comment on how that might work.
So basically, if you can estimate the shaking intensity at a particular location, you can use empirical relationship to derive the likelihood of triggering a landslide, for example. Or you can also derive, if you do an earthquake location type early warning, if that epicenter happened to be in the middle of the ocean, then it gives you an indication. You can get so you get the magnitude and the location. It can give you some hints that the potential tsunami, the likelihood of a tsunami threat is very strong. Yeah, so same with the, you've got empirical relationship for different type of impact. So for, you've got fragility functions for buildings as well. So you can really go into different avenues depending on who your end users are.
And you think that might be able to be calculated that sort of quickly in terms of off of that alert? That's really cool.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's the beauty of having those relationships. It's just a matter of just doing a multiplication. So you get the strength of the shaking, and you can derive rapidly. Depending on what your chosen impact is, you can derive the type of impacts in terms of landslide, liquefaction. Yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah. The tsunami one is a little bit more tricky, so you need to do a more rapid source characterization algorithm for this one. But yeah, that's what I meant.
So it might be able to feed into something like riskscape, kind of.
Yeah, it's like a dynamic riskscape. Yes.
Oh, cool.
Yep. Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So maybe for the benefit of the audience, maybe a little bit on riskscape, Marianne, if you can describe it a little bit.
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, it's basically a impact and loss analysis tool where you can put in fragility functions and hazard functions to quantify the impacts of various different events. So I suppose if you had a particular scenario or event forecasted through the warning system, you might be able to put that into the engine. And I know they're doing a lot of redevelopment with the engine for various different stakeholder groups, but there might be some exciting alignments there. Moving forward as these systems get up and going. It's really neat to hear that you're developing things and testing them. And YCAT, I'm really interested to hear what you guys find. Do you know, are most of the networks in the other countries on 5G or 4G? Or?
I'm not 100% sure what systems exactly they're running off, but I think it's quite important to understand how much latency there will be based off different systems. So if we have half the country on 4G compared to half the country on 3G and some on landline, is that gonna, because you're dealing with seconds here, so is that gonna make much of a difference? That's kind of what we're gonna try and see if it is. So I'm not sure what other countries are doing at the moment, network based.
Can I ask a question, Marian?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Raj.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Raj from Joint Center for Disaster Research. I mean, a question for Garrick. So with regard to your honors project, I know it's you're working with five sensors. So are they located in the same network, or it's in different networks at the moment?
Yeah, so 2 degrees are coming onto the campus sometime in the next month or so. So ideally we'd have all of them on the same system, but I'm not 100% sure exactly where they send it up in the campus, if it's specifically for a few buildings or if it's for the whole campus. So I think that also might be quite a good thing to test half of it on the 4G versus the 5G. So that might be a good way of testing that, but I'm not sure if they're all going to be on the same system yet. Other side might be able to answer that because he's.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, we are also kind of doing few kind of stuff around that, communicating in between sensors. So, the question is, okay, whether it's in the same mobile kind of 5G or 4G, and also, are they on same local area network or different networks, completely connected to different providers at the moment? I mean, what's your plan to simulate?
We haven't actually set it up yet, so I'm not sure if they'll all be on the same system.
Cool.
I can jump in. Yes, this is basically the whole idea, right? We would like to have possibly 1 or 2 just plugged into the optical network, right? The fiber network of the uni. So they would be quite separate as a first instance, which is one of the bigger research questions, I think, because it's one of the things we're really interested in understanding, you know, the proper effectiveness of having different sensors and different networks, and then hopefully the other, well, possibly 3. We're planning on 5 at the moment, but we're not sure if it's going to be 4 or 5 at this stage.
Cool.
But yeah, main research. Yeah, I know you guys have done a lot of work on this, so. Yeah,
it's good. I mean, we catch up sometime because there are challenges, especially, I mean, we are looking at low-cost sensors in households in different networks and creating mesh networks among these sensors in private, where they are located in private networks. It's at that other level of complexity. So, yeah, but it's good. I mean, we'll catch up probably as we, yeah, cool. Thanks.
Thanks, Raj. That's a good discussion going there. And I think Gavin has something to add as well. He said with the widespread rollout of fiber, that would be good to incorporate. So I think there's a lot of good discussion here on the studies that different research teams are doing. So great to see such work being done. Anyone else have a question for Caroline, Julia, or Garrick with their presentations?
Yeah, is that okay if I ask a question?
Go ahead, Hamish.
Okay, look, I'm hearing quite a bit of talk about, you know, the various networks and the speed of them. But I think that it would be fair to say, in my experience, that one of the primary issues with the timeliness of data isn't the network so much as the sensors themselves. I see you're using a Raspberry Shake, and I guess one of the questions that we've faced a lot is how you have an open network that can connect a whole lot of sensors together, and what sort of protocols you would use to communicate that. You know, and the obvious one that most people are looking at is SeedLink. But, you know, if you look at the delay across the network of the transmission, whether it's, you know, even dial-up right through to fiber, you know, right at the sensor, you've got a 1 to 2 to 5 second delay by using that protocol. Have you had any thoughts about what sort of protocols might be suitable, and what about the sensor delays?
Yeah, okay, probably answer that. Yes, so this is one of the current main issues that everybody's trying to work with. So we're currently working with UDP really which is certainly faster, but it's got a lot of other issues that we all know. There's no easy answer. If you have a good answer or some more experience, we certainly look forward to hearing more in the next session. But yeah, what I can say is that we're currently looking at having a UDP, but that's easy because we have a very small network, right? So we understand that our small scale study doesn't necessarily represent what you can do on a national level, clearly. But on the other end, what we are also trying to reproduce is a possible local application of the technology, right? We don't necessarily need a national network to do this, and in fact, I don't think that's the best solution altogether. So I guess we hopefully have some nice, data informative study that can have some influence on how we deploy these things.
Yeah, one of the things, if I had a wish list for, would be an open earthquake early warning protocol for data transfer. Various manufacturers have proprietary protocols, ourselves included, but it's not really something that's inclusive and allows all these different manufacturers to come on board and be able to actually utilize what's out there now, and in the future have something that we can all connect together that actually delivers that timeliness of data. It's a real bottleneck having the sensors measuring the data very quickly, a communications network transferring very quickly, but that protocol that delivers it's slow or proprietary, and really it needs to be open and fast. And I'd certainly be very keen to work with anyone on trying to develop something like that, and I'd be interested to see if there's any interest in this group to start working on something, because there's just no initiatives at the moment at all.
You certainly touch a raw nerve here, and I think it's a critical point, really. And the main reason we use the shakes is that it's open, completely open source, so you can actually play around with it as much as possible. So from a research standpoint, it's actually a pretty good platform to work with.
Can I jump in? I mean, just to share, the whole, as some of you know, we try to bring community of practice together, talking to different people. As Hamish mentioned, actually a couple of, probably last week or so, I had a chat with Hamish as well and few others. So I think like we have a common alerting protocol to warn people, that's the communication side of things. I think ideally for us to succeed, all have to benefit. If this is a national kind of network, that if we all want to engage in this, I think definitely we need to, going into the future, if we can develop some sort of a standardized open source protocol, that's a great idea. I think people haven't done it, but we can be the first to do it in New Zealand. I'm really up for it. And I think my thinking is that people who are working in other proprietary domains, probably serving different other users, they can also get benefits, and we can all get benefits at the end of the day. Society can be beneficial, but it's important thing that we have that community of practice and discussion together, and probably kind of come to some sort of a consensus. As Hamish mentioned, and I also discussed how we directly access this raw data. That's really crucial. And we have been doing some work. Hopefully we should be able to get some results that can be quite exciting. So yeah.
That's pretty cool. And I think it touches on some of the points that Gavin raises, and I think he definitely agrees with you, Hamish. And and he posted another kind of related question that with multiple projects, different stakeholders, I guess, in this space, what's the thought on having a common shared sensor platform or a big data store, which these projects could benefit from? So I think that's an open question to everyone, really. But I think with the discussion going on, I think this is a common thread that's going on. And maybe Caroline, you could, or if Gavin wants to add in, you can feel free to unmute yourself.
Good morning, it's Gavin here.
Hi, Gavin.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
can. Excellent. No, I was just going to expand a little bit further on what I was saying, and I just started typing in another reply. You know, there are parallels with what we're talking about here with an earthquake early warning system in New Zealand, with things like sharing weather information. I've got a weather station at home, and I'm automatically publishing data from that to the UK Met Office, then going into a global data set, also to Weather Underground. If we can come up with a hardware platform, I'd love to install an earthquake early warning sensor in my garage here at home, which has got a nice solid brick wall to attach it to, and I'd love to contribute data during development to any and all of these projects, but I'd much rather have one box that can pump the data out in a common format rather than having a box for each project. And I definitely support Carolyn's comment in the chat. You know, GeoNet is already a significant repository of seismic data. The more we can do to try and create these sensor endpoints that contribute to existing seismic data, I think it would be really good for all the researchers out there to have access to that information.
Cool, thanks. I think we have 2 more minutes before we go to our next speaker. So if anyone wants to add any comments to the discussion so far.
I might just ask Julia if you mentioned there were some behaviors in Japan that were actually people taking less protective actions or something. Are there any case studies from, for example, the US or other places about behavior or how people have responded to the early warnings?
Yeah, I think there are, but some of them are still kind of works in progress, I think. Yeah, so there have been a few studies like looking at, so the emergency mobile alert, you know, WEA, wireless emergency alert system in the States, and looking at kind of some of the responses to the warnings that have been, actual warnings that have been transmitted based on that. So I think some of that data is still being written up, so I'm not sure of the exact details of people's responses to those, but we do know that from Japan, we sort of started there with our research because we really felt that we should look to a country that's actually using these warnings to try and kind of guide our questions in New Zealand. So we looked at sort of the public and how they responded to some of the warnings, and we found quite low levels of people taking protective actions. So similar types of stuff like drop, cover, hold, or turning off equipment. So it's kind of down in the like almost the 5% range. Whereas the mental preparedness aspect was the part that was really valued. So we had, you know, 30–40% of people mentally using it to kind of mentally prepare for the shaking, and 83% of people in Japan saying that it was a really valuable thing to be able to mentally prepare. So we do have some big questions, I think, about how people might respond to warnings, and that really kind of needs to be integrated into kind of things like our exercises. So our, you know, drop, cover, hold, shake out exercises, it needs to be integrated into our public education. So we can't, I guess my main point is we can't really think about this as like just a technology issue or a technology problem that you're trying to solve. It's really, you know, actually what are people going to use it for, and are they going to use it effectively, and then how do we kind of put that into kind of our public education and support that through our exercising to get people to take the right actions. It's a holistic system. So
can I please add just one thing, because it's an incredibly, you know, interesting question when we do this, right? I think Julia said it really well. This is not a technical problem by itself. So what we're currently doing is we are basically training people in virtual reality environment. So we give them different levels of warning. from the same building, and we would like to see how they react. So now this is all from an engineering perspective. So if anybody with a different background would like to pitch in that, I would be incredibly happy, because this is something a bit outside, you know, realizing, you know, a quantitative study on, you know, human reaction is beyond my reach, but I think it would be quite interesting.
Yeah. Thanks, Alessandro. And yeah, well, I hope, and some people in this room might be interested and reach out to you. And that sounds pretty cool, using virtual reality. And yeah, so thanks for the discussion. I think that was really great, and we'll move on to our next set of speakers.